feudalism was originally developed and practiced in medieval society, due to characteristics of society during the American Revolution, feudalism appeared to exist at this time as well. This shows that we were not progressing, but falling back to old ways and moving backwards in time. The colonist feudalistic society battles with the American idea, all men are created equal. The feudal-like system in the colonies was not based on independence or democracy, but a social hierarchy. As Zinn wrote, "The country was not born free, but born slave and free, servant and master, tenant and landlord, poor and rich." Many had thought feudalism was long gone, but author J.Q.C. Mackerel proves this idea wrong as he asks, how is it possible that feudalism, which was generally thought to have been moribund and abandoned at the end of the 13th century, could have become the boogeyman of 18th century political and economic theorists? How could feudalism, if dead, provoke the revolutions of the 18th and 19th centuries? Clearly feudalism was alive and well, making its way into the colonist society. In medieval times, the largest percentage of the population, about 60%, were the serfs, the poor who lived on the noble's land in exchange for work. Approximately 30% of the population were vassals. Vassals held land, but it was a portion of the land owned by the nobles. The remaining 10% of the population were the nobles. The nobles were the wealthiest and owned all of the land. Society during the Revolution mirrored this system. Majority of the population were the poor whites and slaves. As Zinn states, in the Carolinas in the 1750s, 25,000 whites faced 40,000 black slaves. The next tier of society consisted of the merchants and colonists who had an education and some property, similar to the vassals. The smallest percentage of the population, the establishment, possessed majority of the wealth, even though they were a minority in the population. This is supported by Zinn's research, which states that in 1687, the population was 6,000, and out of those 6,000, only 1,000 were property owners. Additionally, in 1770, the top 1% of property owners owned 44% of the wealth. Another big connection between the medieval society and the revolutionary society was the aspect of ownership of the poor. During the medieval and revolutionary periods, this was the most efficient way for the wealthy to care for their abundance of land. A report by the University of Prince Edward Island stated, "The theory is simple. Where land is abundant and labor is scarce, it is more profitable to own labor than to own land." It was apparent to some people that there was a major problem with this system. As the philosopher Rousseau states in Political Economy, he says the greatest evil has already come about when there are poor men to be defended and rich men to be restrained. Rousseau is similar to Zinn because they are both quick to acknowledge problems in the inner workings of the colonies. Contrasting this is Morgan, who usually glorifies the colonies and does not always acknowledge some of these issues. However, Morgan has a shift in his views and comes to agree with Zinn, who plainly states, New York in the colonial period was like a feudal kingdom. This is demonstrated as Morgan writes, although they had committed themselves to the principle of human equality, most of them applied it only to equating themselves with Englishmen, and did not stop to examine whatever inequalities might exist in their relations with each other. Here Morgan recognizes that the colonists were not abiding by their principle of human equality, which is a major effect of feudalism. The colonies were influenced by feudalism through the views of those such as John Locke, who wrote the fundamental constitutions. According to Zinn, Locke was considered the philosophical father of the founding fathers. Yet, Locke's constitution set up a feudal-type aristocracy, wrote Zinn. With Locke's great influence on the Constitution, it would be expected that the American colonists would mimic his ideas. This is one explanation why feudalism was present in revolutionary society. In Locke's fundamental Constitution of Carolina, he calls for lords to have authority and also states, "Every free man of Carolina shall have absolute power and authority over his Negro slaves of what opinion or religion soever." The authority that different groups had over each other does not comply with the independence that the colonies were attempting to achieve. Given all the evidence of a feudalistic society during the American Revolution, I do not agree with the statement in the Declaration of Independence that reads, "All men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." The presence of feudalism in society during the American Revolution proves that colonists did not have individual independence and liberties. These rights were reserved for the wealthy white men.